Hi, and welcome to the video lecture for Chapter 4 and 5 of the Human Relations textbook. The 4th edition. If you're working out of the 11th edition, it's the Chapter 17. So this chapter is all about achieving wellness and managing stress. And then the next chapter is all about dealing with life changes and personal problems. So very interrelated, these two topics. So first I wanted to give you a little bit of background on health and wellness in the veterinary profession. So working in vet medicine can be really demanding. It's demanding physically, emotionally, and intellectually. So as employees in a vet hospital, we must be able to handle the needs of our sick and dying patients, like our animal patients, as well as the concerns of their distressed owners, right? We're dealing with euthanasia appointments. We're dealing with owners that have sick pets and aren't able to pay for treatment. We're dealing with, like I've shared some stories with you guys of people that have pets that take on more additional meaning. And when those pets pass away, it's like they're having to grieve their death as well as, like, say, the death of a friend or the death of a family member, right? So it can be really quite stressful for us in the animal hospital. So on top of all that, we tend to have extremely busy seasons where we're running off our feet. In Manitoba here, we have heartworm season that's really, really busy. We usually have a dental month that's you're just flying around trying to get lots of stuff done. Summers tend to be really busy. Around Christmas time, it's really busy. So it can be really quite stressful when you have those busy times. And then on the flip side, there are times when it's really quite slow. And that can be stressful as well because it can be hard to try to fill that time when it is really slow. In terms of physically demanding, we're talking you're going to be wrestling fairly large animals sometimes, or you're getting cat scratches or things like that. And then intellectually demanding, there's a lot of information we need to know. You guys are getting a glimpse into that so far. There's a lot of things that you need to know working in the vet clinic. So on top of all that, on top of it being fairly demanding for a normal, healthy individual, vet medicine personnel overrepresent when it comes to instances of mental illness. So there's been studies done about why that is. And one of the stats that I found is that 61% of vet students report ACEs, which are adverse childhood events. And that is versus 45% of the general public. So that means that vet students are overrepresented versus just the general public. So you might be asking yourself, wait, sorry, what are ACEs? So adverse childhood events, adverse childhood experiences. These things look like physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, domestic violence in the home, parent or caregiver substance abuse, mental illness of a caregiver, suicide or death of a caregiver, or a family member involved in crime or that's imprisoned. So those events are overrepresented then in vet students. So there's some theories as to why. It's theorized that ACEs are overrepresented in vet medicine because animals are often a source of comfort and support to children, and therefore they tend to want to devote their whole lives to them. So this study was done with vet students, but I would like to extend and extrapolate that information to the rest of vet med as well. Just experientially, anecdotally here, I would say that a really good majority of the people that I've worked with have had just some kind of sad story from their past. So it kind of makes a lot of sense then that we all kind of gravitate to this field. Children that have experienced ACEs, like these types of things, tend to identify more as caregivers as well. As children, they often felt responsible for maybe having to manage their parents' emotions. to try to avoid things like a physical abuse outburst or a mental abuse outburst, right? So they tend to be like mediators within their families as well. So the more ACEs that a child experiences, the more toxic stress they're holding in their body. And you might not even realize you have it there. We'll see bodily effects, like physical effects, such as heart disease and diabetes, and we'll see more mental effects as well. And that's where depression and substance abuse comes in. So I feel like I'm kind of painting a bit of a grim picture here, but I want you guys to be aware, and I want you guys to have that sense of caring for yourself as well. I think I'd be willing to bet that if I asked the question in person, how many of us identify as caregivers here, I have a feeling that all of us would put up our hands. So I want you guys to recognize where being a caregiver can be really hard on yourselves, so that you can manage that and have, you know, a happier life balance here. So one thing I also want to let you guys be aware of here is that veterinarians are at increased risk of suicide compared to the rest of the population. For a long time, it was dentists were the most likely to commit suicide of any profession. Veterinarians have overtaken that. So there are a number of reasons, and I'm going to go ahead and list a few of them. Debt. So lots of veterinarians have school debts, like student loans, that they're still working to pay off. And let's be honest, no one's really getting into vet medicine to become millionaires. Like, you just don't make all that great money in vet medicine. So, like, VOAs, well, I can speak to Manitoban wages here. I'll be honest, I did not look up Calgary or Alberta wages here. But in Manitoba, VOAs probably making around like $13 or so to start. Tech starting about $17 or $18. Associate veterinarians average $80,000 a year. Sorry, those the VOA and vet tech rates are hourly, and then the veterinarian rate is annual. So it's not great money. So it's hard to pay off debt that way. And then also as a veterinarian, associate veterinarian, you're not going to make all that much money. Like $80,000 sounds great when you don't make $80,000, but in relation to like how much work and stress that the veterinarian's job is, that's really not a ton of cash. So veterinarians tend to want to own their own business then, because there's more potential for earnings. So then they have business debt as well, which can start to feel really heavy. Veterinarians typically, and people in the field as well, tend to be overworked. There's a lot of long hours, and we are notoriously bad for taking breaks in our field. It's a high stress environment. I talked about what things are high stress already in the vet medicine or in the vet hospital, I mean. And I talked already that we tend to be caretakers, which means that we tend to put the needs of others over the needs of ourselves. And that's not a sustainable way to live. So euthanasia is also a stressful situation in the vet hospital. It's never awesome having to deal with death, right? So there is that stress of accepting the owner's decision if it conflicts with your own opinion. It's also really, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like, being able to perform euthanasia for animals often does feel like a gift, especially if the animal is really sick or suffering. And sometimes that proximity to death can make dying seem like a reasonable way to ease that suffering of mental health issues. So sometimes it's a lot easier for veterinarians to make that leap to, well, I don't think it would be unreasonable to approach suicide here. There is also relentless pressure from emotional owners. So that, I've talked about this already, that like clients, it's a high stress environment for clients. Even for good appointments, they tend to be anxious because their precious little fluffy is going to have to get a needle. But when their animals are sick, they're really emotionally upset. So it's difficult having professional opinions second guessed or rejected. And also there is that pressure that you sometimes get from owners. So this This is a hard thing to have to hear. I've heard it on a number of occasions, and it bums me out every single time. I feel really defensive when I hear it, and I don't like the accusation. But owners that don't have money to pay for the bill and have a sick animal will often accuse you of not caring about animals and accuse you of just being in it for the money, which is so far from the truth. But it's a really hurtful thing to hear, and that causes a lot of people that work in vet medicine to want to just bow out, because that can be really a really tough thing. It's like you're working your hardest, you're trying to take care of animals, and then you're accused of not caring and only caring about the money. Meanwhile, you're not even really making very great money, and you're in debt up to your nose. So it can be a really stressful environment, especially for veterinarians. But I would again venture that we are all at risk, considering that our backgrounds tend to have more experiences in them that indicate that we would have mental health issues moving forward. It can be really tricky, and then a lot of these things apply to us as well. So I will share with you that there's a veterinarian in Winnipeg that had committed suicide in the vet hospital. He was a vet owner, or a vet clinic owner, and he stayed late after work, and he hooked himself up to an IV, and he set up like euthanol to be a slow drip, and he passed away in his office. So I share this with you because I want you to know that it's real. I can share stats all I want, and I'm sure they have some meaning for you, and it's like, oh wow, yeah, that is really unpleasant. But to hear like a personal story of someone that was affected in this way, I think is just all the more meaningful. So I want you to know that it is real. It does happen. There's access to drugs that can do a lot of harm to a body in a vet clinic, and it's not hard for doctors, techs, VOAs, anyone in the hospital to get access to those and do bad things with them. So I would encourage you to look out for yourself in terms of managing stress in your health and wellness, and also look out for your colleagues. If you see people having a hard time, reach out, right? I think we're getting into a time and place now where we are seeing a lot more openness in talking about mental health. And I think that's a really important conversation to have, especially knowing that in our field, we're more likely to be affected by this issue. So moving on then, let's start our PowerPoint. So wellness is our first topic. Wellness is a formalized approach to preventive health care. So we're looking at ways that we can prevent illness with a wellness plan. To achieve wellness, especially mental wellness, we must learn to understand and manage our stress. And I will tell you right now, you will have definitely stressful times in the vet clinic. So you might be asking, what is stress? I think we all kind of have an idea of what stress feels like. Stress feels like a tightness in your chest. It feels like shoulders scrunched up to your ears. It feels like a headache, right? It feels like heart beating fast and maybe rapid, shallow breathing. But what is it actually? So stress is an internal reaction to a force that threatens to disturb one's equilibrium. And then the stressor is the force that creates the stress. So basically, we have often a mental and a physical reaction to stress making us feel uncomfortable. So what are some things, actually maybe I just want to talk about stress a little bit more, because I feel like this thing doesn't really get too into it. So there are good and bad stresses. Stress overall can have a negative effect on your overall health, especially those bad stresses. You're going to see physical issues like a loss of sleep. You might have upper respiratory or digestive problems. Like, has anyone ever had an upset stomach when they have, like a big presentation to make or something like that? It can lead to high blood pressure as well. And then behavioral issues, you can see decreased activity levels and substance abuse problems. And psychological problems, we'll see depression, anxiety, aggression, a decreased tolerance and patience levels, a disruption of cognition, so decreased concentration, forgetfulness, decreased attention to detail. And then organizational problems are things like what would affect the business. Stress leads to increased absenteeism or tardiness or lateness, and a decreased work performance. So good and bad stresses do exist. Good stresses are beneficial because they're motivating. A good stress gives you satisfaction when you have that project done. It does not cause physical problems like high blood pressure, high heart rates. So a good stress might be like having a reasonable deadline or learning something new where you have that learning curve. Those are like a good stress. A bad stress is something that causes anxiety or health problems. Bad stress has compounding effects, which means it builds and gets worse. It's going to cause increased heart rates, increased blood pressures, loss of sleep, those things we talked about. And if left uncontrolled stress could result in death. So bad stress, chronic stress does cause release of cortisol into the body. Do you guys recall talking about cortisol when we were discussing the endocrine system? Cortisol is a hormone that affects every cell of the body. We see things like decreased immunity when cortisol levels are high. So people that are more stressed tend to get sick more often too. We see problems with metabolism. We see issues with like sexual function. It really runs the gamut. Every single part of the body, every cell is affected by cortisol. So let's see. What are some of the factors, I guess, that affect good and bad stress? So choice, a feeling of having a choice in the matter helps good or bad stress. So if you volunteered for a project and it's kind of challenging, that probably feels like a good stress. You took that on. If something was forced upon you, maybe like job changes, those can feel like a bad stress. That feeling of control, right? So some people feel like things just happen to them and other people feel like they do have control over their reactions. And that will certainly contribute to whether a stress feels good or bad, whether you feel like you can create a plan and master it or not. And then consequences as well. The results of your actions can cause good or bad stresses. So you're taking care of a patient and that patient unexpectedly dies. That feels like a bad stress. So there are lots of different types of stressors that we encounter in the vet clinic. There's internal, which include a person's emotions and sensitivities. And I'm just going to go ahead and point out here that as females, we tend to deal with PMS too, right? There are many of the time when I'm like, I am so irritated by every bloody thing today. What is the matter? And then it's like 2 days later, my period starts. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. So sometimes you're just dealing with internal things and you might not even realize that it's bothering you. External stressors, things like limited time schedules or being short-staffed, having a large workload, those are types of stressors. And environmental stresses as well. So hot or cold weather, I don't know about you guys, but if I'm working and I'm like hot, I just start to feel sick and it just makes me really bitchy. And then repeated loud noises. I think I've talked about this with you guys as well, that when it's really noisy in my environment, I feel like my brain doesn't function as well. So that's a type of stressor as well. I think, okay, so let's talk about coping then, things that we can do here to achieve wellness. So the body and mind must work together to create a healthy lifestyle. Have you guys heard of your nests? You want to tend your nests every day. The N in nest is nutrition. So number 3 here, maintaining a healthy diet. I would say, I would venture forth to say, eat the right diet for you, right? For some people, that might include having the darn cheeseburger because otherwise you're not going to eat anything that day, right? Maybe you don't have a lot of money available to you, so it's like ramen noodles or something. Do what you can. Try to build in as much healthy as you can, but it might not always be perfect, and that's okay. I would also say, just make sure you eat and make sure you're eating enough for yourself. Again, another rant about society from Laura. Can't believe it, but here it comes. We live in a society that tells us, especially as females, that if our bodies aren't thin, that we have less value, and that's absolutely not true. So many people, men and women both, have unrealistic expectations of how much food that they should be eating. And I'll tell you right now, a body that's hungry is not going to be able to function at peak capacity mentally. So if you are feeling hungry because you skipped breakfast or because you're portion controlling and you're eating way less than your body actually needs, you are not going to be maintaining a healthy lifestyle. I don't care if you're thin, that's not a healthy lifestyle to be starving your body. So that, anyway, sorry, rant over. So that's the N in nests. E is for exercise. Exercise properly. What is properly? I like to replace that with move our bodies joyfully. Find the thing that feels good to you to do and do that thing. It doesn't have to be lifting weights and running on the treadmill if that doesn't appeal to you. Put on some tunes and shake your booty. That's fun, right? Do something that moves your body and feels good to you. S in nests is number 2 here, sleep adequately. I would be very curious to know how many of us get the minimum of 8 hours of sleep a night. I know right now, because I'm teaching this evening class, once I finish class, I'm really bad for being like, well, I want to go to bed right away. And then I end up staying up till like midnight, which is way too late for me. So I'll be honest, right now, I feel like I'm not working at my best because I feel like I'm really more grumpy than usual and stuff, right? So make sure that you're getting that sleep, that rest that you need. And then nests, and when we're talking nests, T is for time for yourself or time for your hobbies. So making sure that not everything is just about the grind and getting work done and etc. And then the last S is for support. So support can be in the form of having friends or family members that you can talk to about your feelings or your issues, or it could look like professional support as well, reaching out for to a counselor or a therapist if that's needed. So this textbook also adds 3 other things, and I think these are good things as well. So develop competence in your work, competence in your life. The better you feel about how you're executing the tasks you have in front of you, the better you'll feel overall. When we don't know what we're doing, we tend to suffer mentally because we feel inadequate or dumb, and that doesn't feel good. Number 5 is develop resilience. So resilience is the ability to stay positive in light of a setback. So, it's the whole don't cry over spilt milk thing, okay? Things will go wrong or not as we'd like, but if we can stay positive and work through those things, that's going to be better for our mental health, as opposed to devolving immediately into, this day is garbage, I can't do anything. And then number 6, minimize your risk to health and safety. So you certainly can't have wellness if you are injured or dead, worse, dead, right? So we want to pay attention to health and safety in the hospital. We talked about those in our office procedures course. I gave you that big whole lecture about different things that are safety hazards in the hospital. But make sure you're also practicing health and safety in your personal life as well, right? So just basic things like don't drive without a seatbelt or driving recklessly. Those things are can be harmful to your health and safety. So we've talked about stress. So stressors bring about stress, which is a reaction. And then the body's reaction tends to be fight or flight or tend and befriend. Have you guys heard of tend and befriend before? Fight or flight tends to be the one that we talk about the most. Fight, so if let's say you're at work and you're dealing with stress, your body goes into an offensive mode, right? So maybe you are like picking a fight with a coworker and arguing, or heaven forbid, things are turning violent. I really hope that's not the case. That would be the case of fight, where you're wanting to attack and blame others. Flight, we might see like a defensiveness or just total retreat, where you don't engage at all and just like kind of hide from the problem. Neither one is necessarily helpful, right? And then there's studies that females employ the tend and befriend technique when dealing with a stressor. And it's theorized that that helps them to keep their, it's like an evolutionary response, because it helps you to keep your little babies, what's the word I'm looking for? Safe, right? So tend and befriend is the technique of like laughing along when someone's maybe being like nasty to you because you don't want to make the waves, right? Or that kind of kill them with kindness strategy. So the person or thing or whatever is causing you stress, but instead of like fight or flighting, you're like befriending it. So sometimes that feels really strange, because you're like, why am I doing this? Why am I laughing along? Like, you're at work and someone like makes a racist joke or a homophobic joke or something, and that makes you really uncomfortable, but you don't want to call it out. So you tend and befriend, and you're like, oh, ha, 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 right? That is a coping method when it comes to stress. Again, still probably not ideal, but it is just a body's response. I was really interested when I first heard about tend and befriend, because I felt like that explained a lot of things about myself. Okay, so the brain acts as a self-regulating system to help us cope with stress. So when we're feeling stressful, there's hormone cascades that are activated, and that can lead to those physiological reactions, right? Especially if it's like low levels, toxic stress. We're seeing a lot of cortisol. Stress in an event, where it's like acute stress, will often give you those bursts of adrenaline, right? And you'll feel that fast heart rate and fast breathing and etc. So burnout is caused by prolonged stress. So burnout, I'm just going to define it. Wait, I just want to see if it, yeah, okay. Burnout, I'm going to define it here for you. It's a physical or emotional exhaustion, typically caused because of long-term stress. So burnout occurs when you feel overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and unable to meet constant demands. Burnout's really common in like parents, because kids are really demanding all the time, and you just feel like you're giving it your all and you have nothing else to give. That can happen in the vet clinic too. When you have 100 patients to take care of, it can feel like you're never going to get caught up, and you start to feel that sense of burnout. So burnout reduces productivity because you often just feel stalled out or stuck, and it really drains your energy too. It leaves you feeling hopeless, helpless, cynical, and resentful. So your work life will suffer from burnout. And unfortunately, those negative effects, especially if it's like a work burnout, can spill into other areas of our life. We tend to take those stresses home with us and take it out on our loved ones, which isn't fair to them. And we tend to take it out on ourselves and tell ourselves that we're not adequate. Instead of focusing on the environment or the situation, we focus on ourselves being the problem, and that's not necessarily the case. Fortunately, burnout doesn't have to be permanent, because there are things that we can do to help repair that feeling. And one of those things is breaks. Take your darn breaks during the day, please. This is something I'm passionate about. I can't stand when people joke about, oh, I haven't gone pee all day. I've been holding my bladder because I have to take care of all these animals. I'm like, take the 2 minutes, pee. Like, why would you work in such a condition that you can't urinate, that you can't feed yourself? If you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of other people or other animals very well, okay? So you are part of your care. Like you have to take care of yourself, all right? So take your breaks during the day. Make sure you eat your lunch. Go to the bathroom when you need to go to the bathroom. Also, take your vacations. Vacations can really help you feel recovered from burnout because it's a break from where you've been. It lets your brain have a rest and not feel so constantly on the go, and it can really help to reinvigorate you. As well, I would suggest continuing education. We should have a commitment to lifelong learning in general. Part of our code of ethics is a commitment to lifelong learning. And I find when I learn something new, I'm really excited about getting to work and getting to try those new skills. So that's something that is absolutely wonderful to help reinvigorate you and kind of help with that burnout. Also, if you are feeling burnout because of like your work conditions, speak to your manager about it. Hopefully there's something they can do to help, right? Like if you're short-staffed or there's a task that really bothers you, maybe someone else could take that task. So we've talked about things that can cause stress in the work environment. There's some personal life stresses as well. So significant life changes are a source of stress. Even a positive life change, like let's say a marriage or buying a home or having a baby, those feel like good things. But they can be really stressful as well. Planning a wedding is kind of terrible. I mean, I guess it's fun for some people, I think. I thought it was terrible. Like buying a new house is great. Moving isn't fun. Babies are so amazing and wonderful, but damn, they don't let you sleep. So there's a lot of stress in those significant life changes. Having low self-esteem is a source of stress as well. Just those everyday annoyances like bad traffic, construction on your way to work, too many mosquitoes, those things all bother me. Having social or family problems, like if there's any stresses in your family, maybe conflict or things like that, or with your friends. Financial problems, money is the number one cause of stress in personal life. Having to pay the bills, having to make enough money, feeling stressed about anything to do with finances. And then school-related problems, which I'm sure you guys are living now. It's difficult to meet deadlines, especially, I think it's a little bit different in the way our program is formatted because you just have the one course with the one teacher at a time. So I typically try not to give you where you have 4 assignments due in one day or something. Whereas if you were back in high school, let's say, where you would have multiple assignments due in multiple classes, that can be really stressful. So there are personality factors that influence stress as well. There are personality types that are more stress prone. So if you identify as a person that with a type A personality, you tend to honestly bring stress on yourself to some extent. Feel free to read about it in the textbook if you are type A and you don't believe me. But basically everyone I've ever known that identifies as a type A personality, I just want to tell them, that's not a good thing, right? Because typically you tend to bring a lot of stress on yourself by trying to do everything yourself. And that is not a healthy way to approach your whole life. So if you are a type A person, I would advise looking into ways that you can help yourself to spread the workload around a little bit more. Belief in an external locus of control means that you don't really necessarily believe that you have a lot of control in your fate. These are the people that say, oh, the world hates me, the universe is out to get me. They don't really believe that they have control over what happens to them. And then negative affectivity. Those are people that tend to worry or have a lot of anxiety, that focus on the worst case scenario and just stay there. So that obviously is going to affect your stress levels as well. When your brain and your body are telling you that, if you don't meet this deadline, you're going to die, that feels really scary to your brain and your body, right? So of course you're going to have a more of a stressful feeling in under those circumstances. So work-life stress, having high job demands with low job control, work overload or underload. I talked about that in vet medicine for sure. Role ambiguity and role conflict. So if you're not told what exactly your job is, that's ambiguity. And role conflict is like if you have a job or a task that you do usually, and then someone else is like doing parts of it too. The kind of too many cooks in the kitchen thing. Adverse environmental conditions. That's definitely the vet clinic. There's basically always a dog barking. That is really noisy and hard to handle sometimes. Right now, I would say with the coronavirus pandemic situation, I think vet clinics are definitely working in adverse environmental conditions in terms of having to practice social distancing and like over the phone appointments and stuff like that. It's really stressful right now for the veterinary market. Adverse customer interactions and emotional labor. So those are those clients that we've spoken about already that are really emotionally upset because of whatever's going on with their animals. And then emotional labor. Have you guys heard this term before? Part of emotional labor, especially at work, is regulating one's feelings and expressions to meet organizational goals. So you're upset about something, but you put the smiling face on. That emotional labor can really wear down on a body. And you might not even really realize how much it's affecting you. But having to act a way different than you feel is a challenge and a stressor for your brain and your body. And then we talked about already, if it's a prolonged, it's going to lead to job satisfaction, stress, and burnout. So managing stress, well, we talked about ways that we can take care of ourselves, right? That's self-care, tending your nests. Stress management also consists with dealing with the source of the stress. So eliminating or modifying the stressor. If there's something specific that is really causing an issue, see if there's a way that you can change it. Sometimes it helps to put that stressful situation into perspective. So maybe it's a really busy time at work right now and it feels really hard, but I know I have vacation coming up right away and that's going to feel great, right? It's a stressful situation, but we've been helping so many animals. That feels really good too, right? Give yourself a different, more positive perspective. If you are feeling out of control, so if you're a person that feels like, you're out of control within your situation, that, things don't happen or things happen to you as opposed to you having a role in them, building that sense of control can help as well. Just making a coping plan can really help because you feel like you have some semblance of control. If you're anything like me and you like things to be neat, just tidying up will often make me feel more in control and less stressed. So that always helps me for sure. And of course, we want to reduce our stress through social support. So if you can build a support system personally, like through friends or family or a therapist, and I think it's a good idea to build that social support within the vet clinic as well. We should really be focusing on ways to promote mental wellness within the hospital. And I'm going to share some videos that talk about some of those techniques as well. And then relaxation techniques. So if you like to do some yoga or meditation or, binge watch some Netflix, whatever you do that helps you to relax, do some of that because that will help you to manage stress as well. And one last thing I wanted to mention talking about this stress, burnout, flow is compassion fatigue. So compassion fatigue is the cost of caring for others in emotional need. So it's also known as secondary traumatic stress. And this is something that can happen in the vet clinic. So some of the impacts of compassion fatigue is job dissatisfaction. So just feeling like you hate your job. Interaction with coworkers becomes really difficult. You tend to have a communication breakdown and you might not really like your team members anymore and you used to. It could lead to anxiety and depression. To some degree, some post-traumatic stress, like if you're reliving traumatic cases or pets. We'll see sleep disturbances, more illness, like getting more sick, feeling more irritable. And people just kind of get to a point where they feel like they just don't care about the animals anymore. And that's not a great thing. So compassion fatigue is characterized by a gradual lessening of compassion over time. So we can see compassion fatigue in the hospital when a coworker that used to be very caring and understanding if an animal like pooped in their kennel sees that the animal has pooped in their kennel and starts like yelling at the animal or being really upset about it or something. So they just kind of lose that that ability to have that compassion. So we do not want to get to the point of compassion fatigue, because if we are not taking care of ourselves and our mental health, we're no longer taking care of the animals. I think we can all agree that we feel like it's important to do that because we're all here to learn about it. So I really encourage you to take the time to take care of your wellness, because we do not want to get into a compassion fatigue situation. All right, so moving on to chapter 5 then. In the 4th edition, the 11th edition, it's all just in chapter 17. So talking about lifespan changes and challenges, another contributor to wellness and stress control is the ability to manage personal problems effectively. Personal problems need to be kept under control, or achieving career and personal success diminishes. And that's true, right? Ideally, it's a good idea to leave your personal problems at home and like compartmentalize, right? When you're at work, you're at work. When you're at home, you're at home. You deal with your work problems at work. You deal with your home problems at home. That being said, it can be really difficult to do that. But ideally, that's what we would like to see. So this Erickson thing, I'm like, feel free to read about it in the textbook. I don't really want to get super into it. I just, I mean, I think it's fine. It's a good theory and stuff, but I would just like to kind of skip right over it. So feel free to read about that in the textbook for a little bit more information. And honestly, this is what a lot of this little chapter here is about. So responding to challenges in adolescence tend to have cognitive dilemmas. So we're seeing pre-conventional levels. The moral dilemma is resolved in a self-centered way. And that's so true about kids, right? A conventional level, it's going to be any moral dilemmas are reflected by what they've been told to do. And then the post-conventional level, you're able to see beyond those like rules and look at more abstract principles such as equality, justice, and value of life. Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of want to skip over this. Maybe we should focus a little bit more. I don't know. I just feel like I don't really think any of you are really like adolescents. So I feel like I don't really want to focus on that. So adult life challenges, more than half of life is in the adult stage. So adults face an enormous number of challenges. In order to prosper in their career, we need to learn creative thinking skills. Hopefully we tapped into that yesterday. We want to apply our wisdom, be less self-centered, refine interpersonal skills, and develop business etiquette. So that's what we're kind of working on here. And again, I'm just kind of skipping through some of these. Some challenges that might happen in later life: losing a job before qualifying for retirement. Some people as they age deal with some cognitive decline, especially if you have some type of brain disorder like Alzheimer's or something like that. Certainly you can see that. As people age, they tend to value the present more since they know that they have less time looking forward into the future. They tend to value friends and family more. And unfortunately, as you age, you deal with the loss of family and friends more often. So that's something I never really had to deal with as a child, but certainly now I'm seeing a lot more of it. And it's such a bummer, and I'm sure it just gets worse as you age. And then dealing with dependency as well. Like if you need help to like make dinner or to drive around, those things are more challenging as well. So life satisfaction tends to increase throughout adulthood since major challenges of life are getting met, right? Typically, I mean, this is a really overstatement, but it seems like a good majority of adults, as they age, get themselves more and more set up to just have an okay life, right? So having shelter, having food to eat, etc. So when those things, those barriers, those challenges are met, then you can focus more on the things that really satisfy you. That being said, though, there is considerable variation among individuals. I'm really generalizing there. So personality factors influence happiness and satisfaction. I was kind of bummed out when I read this. Extroverted people are more likely to have high levels of life satisfaction and stability, because I think I'm like pretty solid introvert. Anytime I have to be like outgoing and interactive, it's exhausting for me. Even when it's people I love, like I hang out with my mom for like half a day and I'm like, I need 3 years of nap to recover. Not because I don't love my mom, I'm just not that extroverted. And then satisfaction in the final years drop due to poor health, which makes sense. So job satisfaction tends to increase with age as well, because as you get older, you usually hone in on what you really like to do, and you tend to have worked your way up into a position that you really enjoy. Also, with more experience comes better understanding, a better income, and a realistic view of life and work, unless people have self-destructive behaviors. So for me, I always used to think like work had to be the be all and end all, but I think a healthy way to look at work is you don't live to work, you work to live, right? So your job is part of the things that you do, but it isn't your whole life, right? So it's really important to have like outside interests and things like that. So change is a part of life. It's going to happen. It's going to happen all the time. And navigating changes can lead to success. So being a more flexible person who's willing to, adapt is going to lead to a more happy life. If you resist change, you're less likely to resist change if you recognize that change is inevitable, right? And it's so true. It's always going to be happening. It does help to continue to learn, right? We've talked about that commitment to ongoing lifelong learning, and that's so important. Vet medicine changes all the time. There's always new things available to know. So if you stay ahead of that curve, you're going to be really valuable in your hospital because you are already prepared and adapting for those new things coming in. And maybe you'll even lead the change, which is wonderful. So some people do have self-defeating behaviors, though. Many problems in our lives occur due to factors beyond our control. Like a tree falls on your house or something, you couldn't have controlled that. But many personal problems arise due to self-defeating behaviors. Self-defeating behaviors are people like that don't bother showing up to work on time or miss work a lot, or just kind of self-sabotage themselves in different ways. So people with self-defeating behaviors have a tendency to intentionally and unintentionally engage in activities or attitudes that work against their best interest. Lots of these are due to self-defeating personality problems and a fear of success. So if you feel like while you're reading about this or hearing about it, like, oh wow, yeah, no, that sounds like me, I'd recommend some therapy because a therapist can be really helpful to help you examine your behavior patterns and make changes as necessary. Some of these things are going to be hard to do without the help of a professional. Stopping blaming others and taking responsibility for your action, that can feel hard to do sometimes. Getting feedback on your actions, learning to profit from criticism, right? Taking constructive criticism and doing something with it as opposed to getting defensive. Stop being in denial about problems and visualizing self-enhancing behaviors. So those are things that a therapist can really help you with if you are struggling to do that on your own. And then coping with the loss of a relationship, I'm sure we've all experienced this in some form of another. It's okay to grieve that relationship, even if you're the one that initiated ending it, because I mean, it was a big part of your life, right? So they have some suggestions here to overcome loss, being thankful for the relationship, finding new outlets for your spare time, so like get a new hobby, take care of yourself, right? Rest, relaxation, food, exercise, etc. Pamper yourself, get emotional support if needed from friends, family, or a therapist. Get out and about, allow yourself that time to grieve and heal, and then anticipate a positive outcome. So those are some suggestions for dealing with a loss of a relationship. So absenteeism and tardiness, I kind of touched on this already, but this is typically like stress and stuff like that will manifest in missing work or being late to work. This is a leading cause of employee discipline, is just not showing up or being late. It is basically career sabotage. If you're not there, you can't do the work, and then why would I want to keep you there, right? So you need to recognize that absence and lateness is self-defeating. You're not getting anywhere or getting ahead by not being there. Look at your job as being self-employed, I guess, though. I don't know. I like to look at it as like, if I'm not there, I'm not taking care of the animals that I want to be taken care of, right? Regard your job responsibilities as important, and they are. And then if you need a reward system for good attendance, certainly consider doing that. And then, yeah, you could think of the consequences to your coworkers and clients as well. If you're dealing with any kind of depression, neurobiological disorders, or eating disorders, that's going to be something that you need professional help with, okay? So reach out. The good starting point is to reach out to your family doctor, and they can help you go from there. I think it's important to recognize when we are dealing with things that are beyond our coping skills, and any of these mental illnesses are going to need professional help. And lastly, anger management. Having limited abilities to deal with anger damages relationships and careers. And that's definitely really true. We kind of talked about the fight or flight. You don't want to be the person in the office that's like yelling at everybody and, not working with others because of all this anger. So they have anger defined here as the feeling of extreme hostility, displeasure, or exasperation. The ability to manage your anger is part of emotional intelligence. So anger is just an emotion. It's not a bad emotion or a good emotion. And emotions are just really loud thoughts. So think, well, what am I thinking when I'm feeling angry? And what can I do to fix that? Anger can be an energizing force if channeled properly. And I also encourage you that if you do experience anger, express it before it really builds up. I think, especially as women, we're really bad for bottling stuff up because we don't want to make the waves and then exploding. And that's not a healthy way to deal with anger. So, and again, if you are struggling with any of these kind of emotional things, reach out and get that help. I really wish I would have done a bit of Googling, so I had some recommendations for you in Alberta. But in Manitoba, we do have drop-in counseling facilities. If you do have something like that available to you in Calgary, I certainly encourage you to take advantage of that if you need. Employee assistance programs can be a really great thing as well. They offer mental health help. If you personally don't have, one of your loved ones might as well. I know I have access to employee assistance that covers myself and everyone in my family. So that's amazing, right? So if you have something like that, or your parents have something like that, maybe that's something you can take advantage of. And always, you can reach out to a family doctor. If you don't have a family doctor, at least go to a walk-in. So really take care of yourself and get that help you need. In order for us to best help pets and their owners, we have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. We want to prevent that stress, that burnout, that compassion fatigue. We want to really strive for a work-life balance so that we don't start to feel really bogged down and burned out on the job. And of course, make sure you are prioritizing that self-care. Tend your nests, take your breaks, take your holidays, And lastly, do seek that professional help if needed, okay? All right, so that's everything I have to say on this chapter. If you guys do have any questions, make sure you reach out in the chat, in the email, or in the virtual classroom. Thanks so much for listening.